Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guest. And I got to tell you something, people. The gentleman on my show today, he did my show in April of 2015, and it's funny, so much has happened since then. And, you know, he was, at the time, working on Mom, and he went on to direct some episodes of Mom, and he's constantly working, and he co-created a show, which... It's really good. And I don't just say that because he's on here. It's I've watched all 4 episodes. Me and my wife, Joanne, we love it. We laugh. The show's Bookie. And my guest is Nick Bakay. How you doing, Nick?
I'm good, Steve. 2015, huh? Wow.
It's crazy because, I know you're a Buffalo Bill fan and I'm an Eagles fan. And at that time, when I left L.A., the Eagles had never won the Super Bowl. So that's why now I always root for the Bills to win the Super Bowl because I know what it's like. And we were just in Buffalo this summer visiting friends. And, I remember that. And then they came back and they won. So I'm rooting for you guys. And I honestly think you're going to get hot now. I think you're going to beat Dallas. And I think you guys are going to do pretty well.
If we get there, we're going to be trouble because we're actually playing really well. I mean, that game against your guys... that was not the problem with our season. We played really well that day, and we lost on the road to a great team. But, if anything bites us, it's those games we lost to the lesser teams we should have owned. Isn't that always the lament?
Well, yeah, the Eagles lost to the Jets, so there you go.
Yeah, so did we. That's exactly what I was thinking about. We were one of the many people who lost to that young lad in the Loverboy headband.
Exactly. So... Tell me from the beginning about Bookie, because as I said, it's a great show, and Sebastian's great in it. The whole cast is great, and it's just, it takes some unexpected turns, and it's dark, and I think some people who think of, because you work with Chuck on Mom, I think people aren't expecting, you don't know what to expect these days, but it's on HBO Max, so it's got to be darker. But tell me how the show came about. And why you chose that topic, because it's an off topic.
Well, it's interesting. It was something that was always intriguing to me, and I did a segment on SportsCenter many years ago that was all about. I was the OG Bad Beats guy there. So, betting in particular on football has always been a part of my life, and I know that world, and I know some people in it. Always been interesting. What's really interesting is I was looking back into ancient development notes and realized I'd run a Bookie area by Billy Crystal's production company a billion years ago, and I was like, look at that, and I didn't even remember it. But at any rate, this came about when Chuck approached me because he was talking to Sebastian about working up something. And he said, would you want to work on that? And I said, hell yeah, because I think Sebastian's brilliant, and I was a fan to begin with. And as we started talking, we just veered off-road. I think the start point naturally, with the way Sebastian is as a performer, it's multicam was the first impulse, and then we just kind of went off road, Steve. And we watched him in The Irishman. He was great in that, and he really held his own with some of the great actors. And we thought, wouldn't it be interesting to do something a little crime adjacent? And I pitched the Spooky area that I've been playing around with, and we just said yeah, and we pitched it to Sebastian. And it was a big move for him because I think he was expecting us to say, this is going to be a sitcom with a living room and you're going to do your thing. He went right with it, which was fantastic. And Chuck and I sat down and just started writing the show, and we had the time of our lives. And, like you say, it's really different for us. So it was the ultimate palate cleanser for what we've spent a lot of our lives writing. And, we had a blast. Just a blast writing it. And it really, got a cast of our dreams. We got everyone we hoped for, and they've been a delight. So this has been a great ride.
Now, as a writer, how do you, and I know writers were creative because you've written screenplays, Paul Blart, and you've written for different shows. I know you worked on the Kandinsky method, which is a different kind of show. But as you said, you and Chuck have that there's that sitcom, you're in that groove. That's what you've been doing for years, in front of a live audience, network, it has to be on network TV. You can't go a certain way. 22 minutes, 11 minutes, 11 minutes. That kind of formalization. How did you guys sit there and wean yourself off of that kind of method when you're doing Bookie, where you can do anything because it's just going to run?
It's a great question. I will be honest with you, Steve. It wasn't hard for me at all. I don't think it's hard for Chuck at all either. But I'll speak for myself. This is what I'd be writing if I didn't have a family to feed. It's like, what your job as a professional TV writer is to, I always say, I'm the best tofu you'll ever eat. You put me on a show, I will understand the style sheet, and I will give you the style needed. I wrote those mall cop movies. Those aren't even PG. They're P. If P, not even. And if you knew me, you'd know I don't live PG. I'm not I didn't start my career. I started my career in incredibly edgy and late night stuff. And, I can do the job, and I've done the job for years, but unfettered, when the shackles are taken off my wrists, this is the show I write. It's not, Larry, what are we getting the Johnsons for their fucking wedding gift? Those were long, quiet moments of the soul for me when I was in the writer's room at 3 a.m. listening to people break those stories. So to be honest with you, this was the easy part. The other stuff's hard.
Now, I was going to say, it must be great to sit there when you're writing a script that you can just put fuck. You don't have to worry about them going, oh, you can't put that. So you can just put fuck. I mean, as a writer, you're right. That must give you a bit of freedom, too.
It does. You can, as long as you're not leaning on it as an easy way out of a moment or an easy way out. I mean, our agenda with this show is still, it's a comedy. And I think in terms of streaming comedies, which I do think, look, the great ones are great, but a lot of them are lazy and a lot of them get by with a smile. We made sure we still, this is comedy first, comedy forward, as they would say now. But our agenda is still to make people laugh. We're just making them laugh at some much darker things.
Well, I know I'm not going to give away, but the suicide episode was great. And the thing is, though, and we both come from, the stand-up comedy world and the generation then. I was shocked, and I'm sorry, maybe I'm just insensitive, but there was a warning that said this contains, scenes of suicide. And I'm like, I'm thinking that, well, right then I know something's going to happen. And then I'm thinking the bottom line is it's cable. It's not network TV at 8 p.m. And that sort of irritates me. And I guess for you as a writer, what is that like when you think now you sort of have to watch what you write because you can end up in hot water, even though half the shit that people get pissed off about, there's nothing wrong with. You see more when you watch, these political shows. These people are speaking. But what is that like you when when you hear about there's going to be a warning? You must be like, that's almost censorship.
It's funny, Steve. I hadn't even really processed that because I didn't know that was coming either until I watched it. And then I went, oh, of course, this is the age we live in, where it's like, warning, bologna will be eaten on this show, and it does contain nitrates. Be careful while you watch this thing. You're so right. It's also, there's a spoiler alert effect to that, which is a writer I despise. It's like, oh, okay, well, somebody, and that's a big moment that's one of my favorite episodes, and it does kind of pull the sheet off a moment in that, if you think about it. Hopefully it's still a surprise when it happens.
Oh, it surprised me. It did surprise me. But I know when they walked out, I knew it was happening. But then that, at the end, surprised the shit out of me.
I mean, you would like to think the show's called Bookie, and you look at even just the poster art for this show, you're not, this is not for the tender, but I know we have to be, everyone errs on the side of caution. That's so fascinating. Suicide has literally touched my life in the most immediate personal ways, and it never would have been problematic for me to watch this episode and go, oh, I wasn't alerted. I watch, if you live as long as I have, pretty much every bad thing can happen to you and has. If I end up seeing it on an episode of TV, I don't curl up in the fetal position and suck my thumb. I just kind of go, yep, nope. The show just became a notch more relatable, if anything. So I'm with you 100%. But, it's not our world anymore, pal.
I know. So how did you get Charlie Sheen involved? I mean, I guess him and it's just funny because it was a great scene, and then just the kid. Oh, okay. You can answer this real quick. They're playing poker. It's Charlie. It's the kid from Two and a Half Men. There's a guy with a hat who looks really familiar, and I couldn't figure out who it was.
Well, are you talking about the guys around the table?
Yeah, the guys around the table.
It's the entire original group from the first scene of Two and a Half Men, literally to a man. All those guys are at the table. So it's either Don Foster and Eddie Gordetsky, who were writers on Two and a Half Men at that time, or the actors who were at that table scene playing poker when Angus was a little boy. And it's a gambling scene, and it's kind of a perfect. They still call them Easter eggs. I don't even know. But, the Charlie story, that is a Chuck and Charlie story. We had written a scene in the first episode because we have Sebastian playing a bookie here in L.A. where sports betting is still illegal, which is a huge part of our show. An old school bookie is still the way you fly here. Which is not the case in most of America. But at any rate, we realized, well, this guy would certainly have some celebrity clients, and we're fools not to take advantage of that. And we had a cameo scene in that first script forever. And then one day, but it was not Charlie. And then, we just kept placeholding different possibilities. Then one day Chuck came in and said, you know what? I think it should be Charlie Sheen. And I was at first really shocked. For the obvious reason that there was complete scorched earth after all the Tiger's blood era with those two, and Charlie had been, really, really, really publicly rough on Chuck, and I know Chuck enough to know there had been no true rapprochement there, but I knew he was ready. Time is amazing. Time does heal wounds, and it started, so that was Chuck's call. And after a day or two, I thought about it, and I thought, no, that's kind of great, because everybody knows Charlie bets on sports. Charlie was infamous for that. And we could, and also, would Charlie be willing to have fun playing himself in the context of our world? And could they work it out? And they apparently had a really remarkable phone call. Both sides were really ready to put the darkness behind them. And we were kind of out to the races from there, Steve. And it really, there was some mystery to it. We hadn't seen Charlie really do any hard work in a long time. You never know what you're getting. And that first day we had our table read of the first episode, which is, as I have said, a high blood pressure event to begin with. There was this added experience of watching Chuck and Charlie face to face for the first time. And then, what Charlie are we getting? So it was a fascinating day. And fortunately, it worked out beautifully on all fronts. They were so thrilled to be reconnected. The fact is, those two guys made amazing, beautiful music together for years. And they were right back to it. And Charlie at the table was, he put on a clinic on, this is how you do a table read. He's really good. His chops are there. He's there. It was wonderful.
Now, you're the showrunner, right?
Me and Chuck.
So explain to the listeners, what is the showrunner's job? Because, most people, I know, but most people watch TV and they'll see executive producer, co-executive producer,
right.
Assistant producer, teleplay by, story by, screen. But so what is the showrunner's capacity in Bookie or in any show?
It's a good distinction because producer is the most liquid term in the world. It can mean anything from somebody who literally does everything to make a show happen to a name 4 clicks down that list who has done nothing. And nobody watching at home would know the difference. But showrunner is the writer, producer, and in television, and creator usually. And in television, in film, you always think of it as a medium where credit is always a film by Ron Howard, which writers hate because he didn't write it. And, as I always say, if half the cast of Happy Days has Oscars, how hard can directing be? But writing's hard. Directing, if you got a good DP, is just, hope you're comfortable in the director's chair and enjoy bossing people around. But showrunners do everything. It's like you have to write it, you have to cast it, you have to also make every decision for every department head. You are Checkpoint Charlie, whether it's sets, wardrobe, locations, budget, everything. I have a friend who said show running is like trying to write and shoot and produce a TV show while managing an AM/PM store. It's everything kind of the buck stops with you, but that's great because that means there is one point of view that is hopefully creating a congealed thing that makes sense and has a vision. Committees, we all know committees don't lead to good things.
So you also, I know you got into some directing on Mom. Did something happen? Someone couldn't show up, or you directed an episode? What was that like?
I only directed one episode, although boy did I have fun. And that was when our director got COVID. The week of that weekend heading in, and we had to scramble the jets quickly. And it was an episode that all that type of TV, especially in our system, is a team effort. But it was a script that was near and dear to my heart, and so I directed one of my favorite episodes, and it turned out really well. I could do it. Like I said, the writing was harder than the directing. It just is.
I want to talk to you about your relationship into the sports world. You've been a sports fan all your life. How did you parlay? Because you don't think of someone. You did stand up. You co-hosted some shows. You write, but then you end up doing sports, and you don't think that's one of those. You don't think about that. You don't think a lot of comics going to do sports like you did. How did you get involved? I know you've been involved in sports in ESPN and all these shows for a really long time.
Yeah, I really don't do much now, although for about 15 years I was super active, particularly ESPN. But I did a lot of sports stuff on Comedy Central, and later I did stuff at the NFL Network. But, Steve, it was one of those things that, a lot of it was just, a little kismet. I was doing a show on Comedy Central called Sports Monster, back when it was low distribution, but it was a parody of SportsCenter. And it caught the eye of a bunch of people, and it happened to catch the eye of John Walsh at ESPN, who was really kind of my godfather there, and one of the biggest fans of that show, and also a late-night show that I did with Alan Havey called Night After Night, was Keith Olbermann. He was a diehard fan. In fact, we used to do a bit on the show. We had no audience, so we had a thing called the Audience of One. And we had one theater seat roped off, and if you were willing to fly yourself to New York City and put yourself up, you would be our audience for a show in the studio. And Olbermann did it one time. He was our Audience of One. So, Keith just, to this day, it amazes me. So when they launched ESPN2, which was supposed to be their hip alternative universe ESPN, the Deuce as it was called in those days, Olbermann was moved over there to be the face of ESPN2, which is so long ago, many people don't remember it. And I believe that Keith whispered in John Walsh's ear and said, we got to do some things that are a little offbeat, and this is a guy you should look at. And they looked at tape on what I'd been doing, and so I flew to Bristol, Connecticut, and I showed them some segments and showed them some ideas, and they said, great. And I started doing the tail of the tape segments. I started doing, they had me at the NFL draft. Steve, I did a column on ESPN.com. I was all over ESPN. I've been trying to digitize my old tapes, and I've got hours and hours and hours. It's relentless. But I was very lucky. I got through the veil. Was that lucky guy. There was not, before that, sports comedy was essentially hot foots on in dugouts and Marv Albert on Letterman with bloopers, right? We were the first sort of, I got a take on this op-ed driven comedy, and it worked beautifully. And I had amazing adventures, but that's how it happened. And I went, and I pretty much, they got me over on the mothership pretty fast. And then I started doing the gambling segment, and that really took off.
Tell me more about the gambling segment.
Well, it was, they said to me, why don't we do a bad beat segment? Started out maybe on the deuce, but it was me on Mondays saying, hey, if you had this team -6 with highlights of the game, here's where the college money disappeared. Here's where looking good, this is great, bam, you're done, you're cooked. And it was really popular. They moved it over to SportsCenter. All of a sudden, I'm doing it on Mondays on SportsCenter after an NFL weekend. And it was me against the point spread, and boy, did people dig that. And the NFL hated it. But their attitude was, we're paying you $1 billion. Sit down, because this is America relates to this. And I was smart enough whenever I did segments on SportsCenter, I made sure they were footage-driven. Nobody wants to see a guy yakking. Not during their highlight shows. But these things were nutty, Steve. People loved them. And then they incorporated my wife, Robin. They all knew her and knew she was cool. And they said, why don't we do one week where you're in so much trouble with your bookie that you're on the lam and Robin's there reading an open letter and has some of the bad beats that drove you into hiding. And something crazy happened. And that became me and her the long-suffering wife, me the degenerate, and we sort of turned into this sketch and highlight-driven thing, and it just, people loved it, man. It went nuts, and we did that for about 3 years, and it was really popular, but then the league shut it down when their contract was up with all the networks, and it was time for networks to make deals to carry the games again. We were a deal memo. They said no. Which is hilarious now, because now you have like the official betting partner of everything. Oh,
it's so annoying.
The world we live in now. I'm like, are you kidding me? Because they killed us hard, brother.
See, that's amazing. Because I watched the Eagles post game, and they go, if you had Hurts to throw over this, and it's funny. Back to the betting, and also goes back to Bookie. Is when you say about Bookie, when I lived in L.A., my friend owned this Italian restaurant in Burbank, and this old guy who was his father's bookie used to hang in there all the time, and he had like a notebook, old school, and me in high school.
Went to the old Palm on Santa Monica Boulevard, which was just a mecca here in Hollywood. Every waiter there made book. There was a guy, Reno, God love him. I hope he's still around, but. It was a gambling mecca, and it was open. Everybody, same deal.
Now with the Bookie, this season's 8 episodes.
Yes.
Now, could you have gotten a longer contract? Because you're with Chuck Lorre. Did that only offered, or I would think you get at least 10 episodes because what happens now to the viewer is. You watch a show like The Bookie that you really like. And you're throwing out 2 at a time, which I like because I don't want to stream it all at once, but 2 is good because then you sit there, you have to wait a little bit. But then all of a sudden, you look and you go, shit. 8, the season's done. Wait, we want more. I mean, and then sometimes, so why, for you guys have a proven track record. Couldn't you get 10 or 12 episodes for us?
You would think. No, we were, this is what they said. They said, look, we'll do 8 of them. And we were so into it. We were so jacked up to do this show. We were like, great, let's do it. Let's go. And the other factor, Steve, was, we shot this right up against the strikes. So, we got 8 done and things were over, so 8, was kind of our friend in the context of this bizarre year we're enduring. But yeah, no, believe me, I think we could have done 10, and I would have been thrilled to. And going forth, we could certainly handle that size of order. And I agree with you. I'm watching them play out in real time now, and I'm realizing, well, listen, it drops on Thursdays. You and I are talking, and we're halfway through the season as we speak. And that's kind of remarkable to me, especially coming from the world of 22, 24 episode seasons. But look, the fact that this thing got made, I have so much gratitude because it's what I wanted it to be. It looks like I wanted it to look. I'm very proud of it. I love my cast to death. I would do a million of these. I would spend the rest of my life doing this show. That's how much I love it. But I'm also thrilled that I got to do them at all because a lot of times, when you really love something, it's just a passport to heartbreak, and then they don't even let you get near a camera with them. So, to look at this with anything but gratitude would be my first mistake.
Now, you've had an interesting career. You've always worked. When did you know you wanted to be? It's always fascinating to say, when did you know you wanted to be in the entertainment world? Because, you're a big sports fan. Now, I was a big sports fan, and I wasn't that good at sports. I'll be honest. I was okay. I was like a rec basketball player. I wasn't good enough to make the team, but I was good in rec. When we had the Cherry Hill rec would play. But when did you know you wanted to get into acting? I mean, were you creative as a kid, or were you like me when you were a kid? You wanted to sort of be a sports announcer, but then you lost interest in sports for a little bit, and you came back to it.
I was always a very creative kid. I was drawn to anything like that, but I also played sports hard. I played football and I played hockey hard, and I loved them. But my dreams as a younger guy were delusional sports dreams. I remember a teacher of mine really giving me that look of like, this is an interesting kid, but he's nuts. When I told him that my plans for my future, and this is back when pro athletes did not make a ton of money, because I'm old, was I was going to be a pro football player and I was going to be an architect in the off season. When I read that these guys still had to sell suits and stuff like that, Steve, I was I'm not going to sell suits. I'm going to be an architect. By the way, two professions, as it turns out, I would have been very bad at. But I had plans, right? I always had plans. But no, I always knew that I had some kind of ability to entertain in me. And, for me, I have fallen so far from what the original vision was. I think as a kid, I would watch like Dean Martin and the Gold Diggers, and I'd say, yeah, that's for me. I want to be Dean Martin. And here I am writing comedy with a bunch of dorks in cargo shorts until midnight every night. It is so not that, but here I am.
I want you to tell me a little more. You were in a really good time in the comedy scene in New York when you were doing stand-up. Tell me more a little about that, because I know so many people that came out of it. And I'm good friends with Rich Scheidner, and he was before, and I was a little after, because I started comedy in like '88. But you guys were in the New York scene. What was that like? Because I know it was you, Scroven, the late Ken Ober. I mean, there's some great acts. Lou DiMaggio.
I know all those guys. In fact, I just saw Lou about 3 weeks ago, and I reminded him of that great joke of his about when his father told him the facts of life, which I won't do justice to, but it's one of my all-time favorites. But Steve, I never really did the club scene as a comic. My background is weird. I know that whole generation through my time at the Comedy Channel and through my world after my career changed there. I trained to be an actor. I'm a classically trained actor. I did regional theater. I did commercials. I did TV shows. For, 10 years I lived in New York City and just starved. I was like, I always say about my acting career, I was just good enough to get my heart broken constantly, just good enough to be in the game, but never got over. But while I was doing that, I started writing for the National Lampoon, and all of a sudden I realized, if you can write comedy, this is a little bit like being a left-handed pitcher. Everybody needs one. It's really different than being a 24-year-old young thespian. No one needs another one of those. There are too many of us. So once I started writing comedy and entering that world, that's when I realized, this is who I am. Okay, interesting. At least I was smart enough to listen. So that led me quickly to working for Alan Havey's show on Comedy Channel, nay, Comedy Central. And I was there for about 4 years doing Sports Monster and Night After Night and everything. And all of a sudden I'm doing on camera, I'm writing, I did a little live stuff during that time, but really I was working on TV shows, strip shows, all week long, every week, and having the time of my life. It was almost a collegiate experience at the studio we had down at 23rd Street in Manhattan. Met my wife Robin there, met some of the best friends of my life, the Higgins boys and Gruber, Eddie Gordetsky. I mean, important people in my life. Steve Higgins was our best man when we got married. That's my college, really. And from there, that's when Dennis Miller saw me, and he plucked me, and that's how I got to L.A. I was his sidekick on his original talk show, and a writer there, and then I'm in L.A., and all of a sudden my career became writing and performing on sketch and late night shows. And that was a solid, 7 or 8 years of my life. The first time I took a job on a half-hour sitcom, I cried because I knew I had to do it. I knew it was what I needed to do to provide. The time had come. My whole career, I was running from it like Indiana Jones with that boulder. I was like, no, I don't want this to be, I still had Dean Martin in my soul, brother. Back then I had nice suits, I had plans, and that boulder just crushed me. And there I am writing these fucking half hours. I couldn't believe it.
What was your first show you wrote on, the half hour?
Just to make it extra sexy, Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Now, okay, so what is that like for a writer? As you said, you come from, Dennis Miller, you're writing when I'm guessing, I don't know in this first year, but I guess the late Rooney was on your staff, Regi, I'm guessing, I can imagine.
He was. The staff was ridiculous. It was Murderer's Row. It was Mark Brazil, Drake Sather, Norm MacDonald, Regi. Rooney was our head writer. I can go on. I'm forgetting guys. Eddie Feldman,
Dugan,
Stephen Leo. It's ridiculous.
So what is it like when you go, and it's seriously, when you go from that, and, that's just just Rooney can write something. All these other guys just added stuff. Rooney was brilliant. But what is that like when you go from that to then you're going to a writer's room on a show like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and I'm sure
it wasn't that fast, Steve. It wasn't that fast. I went from there. I did a year on In Living Color. I'm writing. I'm on camera. I'm doing the Dirty Dozen sketches. I'm still making it work. Then I got a show called She TV, Carsey Warner.
But what is it like though?
Point of view sketch show. Oh,
down the road when you get into a room like that.
You know what? Here's what it was. I went there thinking two things. One, well, it was fun, and now I'm, basically an accountant, But I was also very relieved, as you always are, to have work. I never, ever resented the fact that I was working and providing. And there are times in your life where that has to be the alpha, the prime objective, right? And then, as it turns out, and you can never handicap anything, football or life. It was a wonderful job. Turns out the job goes 7 years. I'm the voice of the talking cat. There happen to be some wonderful writers there in the first 4 seasons who I learned a lot from. I learned a lot about how to write a half hour. We make a good show. The show used to get 2-year pickups. I actually, it let me have a life. It let, my dad passed away. I could buy my mom a house. So many good things came out of that gig I took with my nose in the air. And it just shows you that you think you know things and you never know anything. And from there I end up on King of Queens, and there I end up writing movies with so it just, my attitude was useless, but there was a little bit of a death of identity going into it. We're all allowed that, especially when you're younger, although, like I was a kid. Everything in my life has kick-started later than the average bear, so, but, I look back on it with, again, a lot of gratitude. But man, Steve, I went in there with a lot of confusion. But the one thing I'll give myself some credit for is I can get off my high horse fast. And if I'm around something that has a real decent reason for being, and I'm around talented, good people, what more can you ask for?
And for you also, King of Queens, you were on all shows that you pretty much knew they were going to get picked up again. You've been on hits. I mean, you look at your show. I mean, that must be great too. Then going into, Mom's a hit, so
Mm-hmm.
you know when you're writing that you're going to have another year of work. I mean, as a writer, that must be great because there's so many shows that don't get picked up. But for you, is the sense of security comforting because you sit there like after season 2 of Mom when they're getting great ratings, you're going to have a 3 and you probably know you're going to have a 4 because it's CBS. What is that like? Does that just put an ease to you because you're not like, holy shit, I have bills and if the show gets canceled, I'm fucked.
Oh God, yeah. No, I mean that's something that and that gets more meaningful every minute you're alive. And if you are bold enough to have a family, it's really interesting. I mean, a lot of my arc as a man has been letting go of the needs of my identity. And I look back at the narcissism of my 20s, and it's just kind of horror. It's horrifying. It's embarrassing. I think that was the mission then. I don't know. But where I am for many years now is the thing that I take away from my work is, the most important thing about it is the pride I take in being able to take good care of the people I love. And also to be the kind of person in the workplace that takes good care of the people around me there too. And that's, that's the stuff that lets you sleep at night, much more so than when you're young and you're on something that isn't working and you're terrified, like, well, this is the one. They're going to come in the night and kick me out of showbiz. Everyone is so afraid that fraud, that imposter syndrome. But the other thing is that you really feel like everything you do has to be perfect and has to represent you so perfectly and completely, or you're a tortured soul. I don't miss any of that, Steve.
I got to ask you, you just brought up imposter syndrome, and I just interviewed Michael Boatman, who's been on a ton of TV shows, Spin City.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, until he was 40, he felt like he has imposter syndrome. What is it with creative people that we think, even Paul Ben Victor said when he was on The Wire, he said, he goes, I thought they cast the wrong person. I didn't think what do you think it is that gives us the creative type? Because we all have it. You just mentioned it right then. You're being successful. Why do you think we have that imposter syndrome? Is it because our creativity comes from insecurity, or what do you think it is?
I don't think it ever goes away entirely. You just learn how to manage it, like all conditions in life. Your first mistake probably is to think, I'll be over this someday. You won't. You just learn how to roll with it. At this point in time, I think of it as, now I've tried to make friends with it. I think it's a component of integrity. I think that if you lose a little bit of that, I see it in people of huge accomplishment still have that. I see it in them. That worry of like, this is the one I got found out. This is the one. People who, they're beyond being found out. And if I see that in them, I used to look at it and think, well, isn't that sad? They're made man and they're still frank, and now I look at it and go, that's great. You're still in it to win it, It's an essential component. And you shouldn't resent it. You should go, good, I care.
Now, what was going through your mind during the strike? Because you're involved in both strikes. You're the writer, and then we always think, okay, so when the writers get off strike, they can start crafting the series. But then they craft so much, and there's still no actors. I mean, I've only talked to actors about the strike. Tell me what it goes, because you guys settled first, but you know, do you worry, or do you sit there and go, it's going to be solved, but do you sit there and go in your head, well, what if this doesn't go for a year? What am I going to do?
Yeah, no, everybody went through that. I don't think anybody anticipated that they were going to go as long as they did. And we settled first, but we were out longer. The writers really were we were the snowplow. And if the actors hadn't gone out, I think we would have been effed hard. The fact that SAG-AFTRA joined in was enormously helpful. We're at a weird tipping point. The business is. I have my own theories, but I do believe a lot of this stuff is way above my pay grade. I really do. But I'm not so sure it's not above the pay grade of a lot of people who are in those chairs. It always made me laugh. We struck hard about the fear of writers being replaced by AI. And, I've read AI generated stuff, and I have no doubt it is a matter of moments before it writes well. But I'll tell you this, the people who are so panting to have it replace me, they're the ones that should be really careful, because I know AI can do a better job at what they do right now. Because these companies, a lot of the decision making, it's typical showbiz, and this is time. I've been around the planet long enough. I've seen this my whole life. That record company just had a hit with a song called The Twist. We got to put out 400 records about The Twist. It doesn't work that way, Everybody watched Netflix and watched streaming and went, oh my God, we got to stream now. We got to stream now. We don't understand it, but we're jumping in. And now they're all going, what were we doing? And what were we doing? Making all these shows where every episode had, a dystopian. I was for years the writer. Like, I can't create a new world for you. I can write about Buffalo.
Right.
Buffalo's not in vogue. You need a dystopian world where lizards and humans are bred. And I'm like, fuck off. I can't do that. And I don't want to watch that, And those episodes all cost $100 million apiece. Well, here you are. Here you are. And now they're all going, oh my God, what have we done? We've got all these massive concept shows that we can't really say helped our bottom line. But we just thought we got to get into the Game of Thrones business. We got to get into the Netflix business. We got to it's working for them. We can't look stupid. We got to do it. But my theory about showbiz is always, there are periods of time where it hits its hard surface and turns into 1,000 little tiny scattered balls, but they all reconvene. They all turn into one glommed ball again. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to end up with 3 or 4 networks, for lack of a better word. I don't think you can sustain networks and streamers and business and blorp and fling and ding dong, and it's like it's going to be 4 companies. They'll all have the same name on every platform. I do think austerity is going to be back in vogue. But I don't know, man. I don't think anybody knows what's going on, and I think next year's going to be scary weird.
Well, I think you're right, and it's funny because right now we're in New Jersey. Marijuana's become legalized. Now, right near where I live, there's going to be 3 dispensaries a mile within each other. And for me, it's like they can't all do business. It's like the streamers. You sit there and you go, I want to watch this show. Then you go, well, wait, there's this show, and there's so many damn shows, you don't know what to watch. So the future. What's the future of you, Nick? Okay, Bookie's done. Now, have you gotten a word about a second season yet, or do we not know? Or
no, we haven't heard a thing. We're in the confluence of it's the holidays-ish almost now, and nothing happens until the new year. And I think they'll and also the streaming model is pretty cagey. We have no indicators. They don't really deal you in. At least we haven't been dealt in yet. I've gotten great feedback on it. I know people are watching it. But what they want and what we want, I don't even know, Steve. It's not like old days where you can go, Well, we were the number 12 show. I think we're doing pretty good. It's like,
But,
I don't know.
but one upside you also have is, Sebastian is constantly on the road.
Yeah.
So that sits
Yeah.
there and brings a whole new audience. And as I said,
I agree.
we didn't know what to expect because I really didn't see any previews of it. It's not like, we all have all the channels, but I don't only watch. But I said, I heard you were involved with it, and it looked good. And I said, and that's the thing. I think the one positive side going is Sebastian, comedy-wise, is a household name. You wouldn't think of it.
Yeah.
People who I never knew even went to comedy clubs go, "Oh, do you know Sebastian Maniscalco?" And I go, "I don't," but that must be a great benefit for you guys.
Oh, I think he's a huge asset, obviously. I agree, and he's was so tremendously good in the show. Listen, I believe in the show. I believe it's delivered. I think it's funny. I know, and what's interesting, the one thing I did hear is that we have like almost a 50-50 split of men and women watching it. You said the same thing. You and your wife watch it together. That's interesting. It makes me very happy. It doesn't surprise me in terms of what the content is, but again, in a world of 1,000 menu items, I'm glad that's happening. I just hope they keep getting the word out. I'm happy to do anything I can do to get the word out on the show because it is really fun. I do think it's worth everybody's attention, and I really hope we get to do more because things that click like this does. It doesn't grow on trees, and it's not to be taken for granted.
Now, do you have any other shows you're going to be working on soon?
Between this and launching, and I'm working on the final season of Young Sheldon as we speak. And now I'm always cooking some things up in development, but those are my headlines.
Well, I want to thank you, Nick. How can people find out more about you? How can they get in touch with you? How can they find out more about Bookie?
Well, you can always check me out on, I'm so bad with the social media, on Facebook, on X. I am at Nick Bakay #4Real, Nick Bakay for real. And I'm on Insta. And I don't even know what the hell I'm called on Insta. Let me look. Welcome to Old Guy. I don't know.
Well, just
Nick
search
Bakay.
Nick Bakay. You can find it.
There you go.
So people
You'll find me.
Seriously,
If there's another one, I feel sorry for him.
yeah, exactly. So people, seriously, go check out Bookie. Seriously, it's worth it. Go look up Nick on IB.
Stream it on Max. We drop on Thursdays. Get on board. It's awesome.
Get on board. It's a great show. Go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find over 990 episodes. I'm sorry. You can email me at coopertalk.net. Twitter, I'm at CooperTalk. Instagram, I'm at CooperTalk1. Remember, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guests. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you next time.